Magic is an essential part of the Dungeons & Dragons experience, yet homebrew and custom rules could potentially make it a more interesting experience for players in a campaign. A large chunk of the rules in DD are devoted to simulating the effects of magic, while the plot of nearly every DD campaign revolves around a potent magical artifact or powerful working of magic. The rules for spellcasting in DD present magic as a formulaic discipline, with each spell wizards or clerics memorize possessing a fixed, consistent effect. Dungeon masters who are interested in a less formulaic magic system can draw on the design principles listed below to rework how magic functions in DD, giving players mechanics for creating new spells, altering existing spells, or treating magic as a more fluid, improvisational discipline. The magic rules for Dungeons & Dragons, sometimes done wrong, have changed greatly over the past few decades and game editions, but are still heavily shaped by two specific sources of inspiration. The first source of inspiration for DD magic was Chainmail, a medieval miniatures war game whose rules became the bedrock for combat in Dungeons & Dragons. The fantasy gameplay segment of Chainmail contained rules for adding spellcasters to a classic medieval army, and accordingly included fixed rules for the casting of magic missile and other utilitarian spells. Magic spells were relics from a more civilized age in Dying Earth, Jack Vance's psychedelic, melancholy fantasy literary setting that DD drew inspiration from, and they frequently had the names of their creators worked into their titles. Many could only be cast by wizards who painstakingly memorized their complicated formulas. In the earliest sessions of DD, the Castle Blackmore and Castle Greyhawk campaigns run by Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, there was only one magical character class, the magic user, or wizard. Like the magicians of Vance's Dying Earth novels, the wizard would memorize a list of spells from their spellbook, carrying those spells around in their minds like bullets loads in the magazine of a gun, literally, firing and forgetting them in the moment of their casting. Many early DD magic spells, and spells in other old-school tabletop RPGs, had stark, descriptive names like ESP or Fireball, while others had grandiose Dying Earth-style names like Tensor's Floating Disc. As DD evolved, new character classes with new paradigms of magic appeared: the cleric, who received restorative and protective magic from their patron deity, or the druid, who could change shapes and command the elements of nature. As of DD's 5th edition, these other spell-casting classes still use the same spell slot system as the original DD wizard class, even though concept of memorizing spell formulas doesn't quite match the thematic flavor of cleric, druids, or sorcerers. For this reason, dungeon masters not using fake DD homebrew rules for magic may want to craft a brand new magic system for their Dungeons & Dragons games using one of the following approaches. Dungeon masters could hack DD's magic system to utilize magic points after Dungeons & Dragons became successful and demonstrated the profitability of the role-playing game concept. Several game developers published their own tabletop RPG, drawing inspiration from early DD's rules while also trying to implement different, more intuitive mechanics. Two competitors to first edition DD, Tunnels Trolls and RuneQuest, introduced PowerPoint or Magic Point mechanics where wizard-type PCs had to spend points from a limited pool of magical energy in order to cast certain spells. More recent games adopted the RPG Magic Point, Mana Point mechanic with enthusiasm, equipping player characters with a blue-colored energy bar that represented their capacity for casting spells. Designers of Dungeons & Dragons have experimented with magic point spell casting systems in the past, most notably with the psionic school of magic featured heavily in the Dark Sun fantasy setting and monk subclasses who use ki to cast certain spells. The current spell slot rules of DD 5th edition are also half a step away from being a classic magic point system, giving players the ability to upgrade the potency of certain lower-level spells by using a higher-level spell slot to cast them with. DMs looking to use more spells or skills fueled by magic points of some kind should carefully study previous conversion attempts made by developers of DD, calibrating the point-to-spell ratio so spell casting doesn't become too weak or too overpowered. Dungeon Masters could hack DD to let players improvise magic. In most tabletop and digital RPGs, players are given a fixed list of spells that their characters can cast, spells often designed to damage, manipulate, or hinder enemies in dungeon crawling segments. The Dungeon Master's Guide for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition does contain sections with advice on how to build and balance spells that fit the classic DD party roles of druids, paladins, wizards, clerics, or bards. The process of designing a balanced new magic spell in DD5e can be time-consuming both in and out of character, making the discovery or creation of a new magic spell the end goal of several campaign sessions. To design a more freeform, imaginative homebrew magic system for their players, Dungeon Masters of a DD campaign should look to the rules and themes of tabletop RPGs centered around improvisational magic. Mage, The Ascension, for instance, lets its magical PCs create and cast new spells on the fly, limited only by their affinity rating for specific spheres of magic and the risk of triggering a reality-fracturing paradox if they push too far. Dungeon Masters might also draw inspiration from the spell creator systems in Morrowind and Oblivion, which let players create original spells with customizable forms of damage, duration, range, and radii of effect. Implementing these sorts of freeform spell casting rules without changing the Dungeons & Dragons system beyond recognition is a challenging endeavor to say the least, but may also give Dungeons Masters and players the change to spice up the fantasy worlds of their games with weird, marvelous magic unbound by the paradigms of previous DD editions.